We acknowledge that the land the Go Open Data Association is webcasting from is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Toronto was built on sacred land that is part of an agreement between Indigenous peoples and extended to allied nations to peacefully and respectfully care for it.
Go Open Data. This is Mission Control. You are go for lunch.
Take some time away from your office bay to the Good Cafe. Open data, go open data, open data, go open data. We meet up virtually. All our beverages are free for open data coffee. Open data, go open data, open data, go open data, open data, go open data. Welcome to the Good Cafe.
Indeed, welcome everybody. I'm Keith McDonald with the Go Open Data Association. It is Good Cafe time again. We're on Wednesday instead of our usual Tuesday, but we have an interesting, exciting show for you today. It's Open Government Week, and we decided that we would do something to honor that. So what I'm going to do is introduce our panel, and we're going to get right to it with some questions. I just want a quick look at how many we've got here already. Yeah, we have a great enrollment today, and we already have 21. So we're thinking we may get more questions than normal. So we're planning to end around 1 o'clock, but if need be, we will go over as much as we can. And of course, if you have to leave us viewers, that's fine. And in fact, we may lose a few panelists too. So we've got the panel on the screen. I'm just going to minimize that so I can see myself directing things. Okay, and what else do I need? Right. All right, so we've got three excellent panelists with us today. We have Jaimie Boyd, who's the partner, National Digital Government Leader, Deloitte Canada. We have Barbara Swartzentruber, Executive Director, Smart Cities City of Guelph, and Yuri Konga, Executive Director of our Go Open Data Association. So welcome, folks.
Great to be here.
Fantastic to have you as well. So let's launch right into some questions. This is digital transformation in government that we're going to be talking about today, which is very timely. And we've got some good expertise with Barbara and Jaimie having been in government specifically not that far long ago. I think it was, you're in this new job about 6 months, you were saying. So, and of course, Yuri with his experience with us in Go Open Data and also in government. So let's throw things out. I'd like to have Jaimie start first answering this, but please, Barbara and Yuri, weigh in when Jaimie's done. First question is, how would you define digital transformation, and does it impact on corporate culture, or is it simply a technology shift?
Great question. Hi, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be joining you today. I'm joining you from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people on Vancouver. As Keith said, I've been a long-standing, I would say, lover of open government. We've had an intimate relationship for many years. I'm just so thrilled to be talking about the interplay between open government and digital government, which is, I think, one of the most interesting and exciting things happening in the public sector right now. For me, digital government and digital transformation writ large in the public sector is about using new tools. So they can be new technologies, new processes to deliver great services. And then also building up the processes and the governance around those services and those practices so that the use of technology or tools is sustainable and inclusive and accountable and actually makes sense for the people that we're trying to serve. The question is about how does it impact the organizations that try to take on these digital transformation journeys. And I think it's worth sort of grounding ourselves a little bit in the history of digital adoption in Canada. We started with sort of a focus on e-government, and it was essentially digitizing paper-based processes. And so you would see forms just taken like one for one, put on the internet, and it's like, all right, fixed it. What we learned, however, is that that's actually a really problematic way of providing services. It entrenches the same sorts of inequities that might have existed before. Sometimes it's really hard to manage the data. And we miss out on all sorts of really great opportunities when we do that. And so for me, digital government is more about building around user needs. It's about what is truly desirable for the people we're serving. And I very pointedly don't say citizens, it's all people, regardless of their immigration status. So the people we serve, is it desirable for them? Is it viable? So are these things that we can actually do? And then is it feasible, right? And so is it something that an organization can deliver from a business perspective? Does it have the capabilities, or is it able to access the capabilities through firms like my own? And then finally, is it responsible? Like, does it align with the values of the organization? And so I think that that's sort of a real evolution that we've seen, where it used to be e-government, take that form, put it on the internet, we're done. And now it's really, no, let's start with the needs of the users. Let's think about inclusion. Let's think about what is desirable, viable, feasible, responsible. And then on that basis, I think that it is a major cultural shift. This isn't just about technology. Often the technology is the easy part. The governance, the impact measurement, that's far more difficult. And so for me, to respond to the question, yes, digital government right now represents a major cultural shift in the public sector in Canada and around the world. And those things that are most sort of wound up in that cultural change are the imperative of being open and being accountable for the way that public organizations spend resources, being agile. We have lots of evidence that waterfall-based processes for product delivery in the public sector often fail to achieve the original objectives. We've got lots of evidence around that. And so being agile and really doing that discovery process, knowing the users, iterating with users, that's going to be a major change. Being truly human-centric and driving an inclusion agenda, that's a big change. And then really recognizing that the technology is almost always secondary. The business transformation, the focus on users, that's going to be your primary goal. For me, those all suggest that this is a major cultural transformation.
Lots to unpack there, for sure. Barbara, Yuri, any further thoughts? Disagreements?
No, I don't disagree at all. The project that I've been working on for the last 3 to 4 years is a smart city project in the city of Guelph. And the thing that I reflect on the most is that technology and data are secondary conversations for the community. The primary conversation is, what is our goal? What is our vision? What are we trying to achieve? And it's only really been, we're kind of at the midpoint of the project now. We've been layering in the technology and the data, the digital transformation piece, which is a significant piece, not just for government, but for the community sector. So I'll just back up and say that this is a collaborative project between 2 local governments and many community agencies. It pretty much covers our entire community. And so they came together and created a vision and created a culture of innovation and agility around developing programs and projects that would get us towards that vision. And it's only in the last, it's only once we're very clear on that vision that we started to talk about, okay, now how can data and technology help us achieve it? And it felt like much more of a organic kind of a conversation than starting with, this is a digital transformation project. In fact, sometimes our funders have to remind us, you are a smart city project you're talking about. But really, it's the way that gives you a layer of support to realize a different culture, different approach, different way of collaborating. And so I would say that the cultural change happens with inside government. It also happens with the community and with I work in a municipality, so we talk about residents, with the residents within our area, but also residents of Canada kind of writ large. So I'll leave it there.
Yuri?
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So a couple of things. I'm getting feedback somewhere.
You're okay from our end.
Okay, anyways, I mean, when we look at digital transformation, and I've been through it from like the mid 70s up to today, and it continues, it's much more than moving from a paper-based analog process to an automated based process and systems, leveraging technology for an enhanced and more effective service delivery. I think what, in addition to what's been said, I would comment that change management continues to be a huge challenge, as many of the corporate cultures, irrespective of what level of government we're talking about, are more comfortable with status quo, especially when it comes to technology, and changing community needs and beliefs are something that directly impact on the design process of getting into digital transformation. What's the value proposition of the transformation? Are you actually getting value at the end of it or not? So there's a lot of questions, and as I stated earlier, that change management continues to be a huge challenge, and it needs significant leadership, from senior management, irrespective of what level of government we're talking about, including politicians, to move some of this forward. There's some thoughts.
Yeah, good point. Actually, with an election happening as well, I wonder how many citizens, our viewers even, are asking those who may be knocking on your door or handing out pamphlets, hey, what's your take on digital, open, and so on? We'd like to see that kind of engagement for sure. Excuse me. I'd like to ask this one of Barbara, actually, because I recall, Barbara, you were very active in the early days of open government, starting an Ontario-wide group that we were attending conference calls back in the earlier days and so on. So I want to ask this of you, and again, other folks can weigh in as we go, but how did changes in digital transformation affect open government and open data programs?
Yeah, so yeah, I have to go way back to my time in the Ontario government leading the IT strategy and the early days of open data. So, I remember when it was, we're back at the stage of open data when people were worried, well, what happens if you open it up? What might people do with it? Oh my God. But the digital transformation process simply made it, I think it accelerated the opportunity and made it easier. And it made it possible for people as people got technology and services in their own lives in the private sector, it made it more and more possible for government to understand how digital transformation could enable things to open up and services enable collaboration between services. And, just sort of between this question and the last one, what I'm really fascinated with is as we go through this digital transformation and as we open up government and open up data, what happens, and we saw it in the pandemic, when you get rid of bricks and mortar, a whole bunch of other things change, right? Like you don't have to only deliver services of one entity. Suddenly you can share service delivery online. Oh my gosh, what does that do to governance, accountability, transparency, collaboration? It just begins to open up so many new business models and so many governance questions and accountability questions. And I think that's a little bit of the culture change management that Yuri was talking about. We have to be ready for an acceleration. And we were just talking before we got on air about how the pandemic accelerated all things digital and the ability to make that transformation very quickly. And people adapted to it. You know, our whole municipal organization went online, as did many others. Something that would have been unheard of or unthought of as a possibility. And we're all doing fine. And, you know, in some ways there's no going back. So I think that digital transformation, we're going to see increased acceleration of it, but it's going to lead to the questions about the back office. You know, suddenly we're talking about, could we share back offices across local governments and across the community? Could we do more wild and crazy things? So I think for me, those are the really interesting parts of the impact it's going to have on open government.
Excellent. I'm just waiting to see if anybody's going to jump in. Any comments from Jaimie or Yuri?
Yeah, I'm very happy to jump in. I absolutely love Barbara's response there. The opportunity of digital for open, for me, is the opportunity of doing things at scale. And I know that there are lots of folks on the call who have huge expertise. I saw Jessica Aves on there, lots of wonderful experts. So I feel almost silly saying this, but for those who are perhaps less familiar with open government, for me at least, it's about transparency. So knowing what your government's up to, accountability, so having the data to hold elected representatives, administrators of the public purse to account, citizen participation, and ultimately cross-sector innovation. So those are the components of open government in my mind. And digital mechanisms allow not just government, but everybody to access and leverage open government assets at scale. And I'll give a couple examples of what I mean by that. It's interesting. I get really curious about the history of these things. And at one point when I was working in the government of Canada, I met some of the sort of instigators of the data liberation movement. And if you haven't heard of it, I would really recommend looking into it. It's fascinating. It was, you know, almost 50 years ago, probably more actually. I think it was in the 60s. Academia in Canada was asking StatCan for easier access to data. And so they would mail data out, and then things progressed, and eventually it was CD-ROMs. And the story that I heard was that you would know, all right, my StatCan data dump is coming, and everybody would get all excited and go over to the university library and see what did the government send me this month. And you contrast that with today, where the open government program that the government of Canada runs is based on a highly scalable interface based on an open source tool called CCAN. And it houses tens of thousands of data sets that you can access at any time of day. And if you don't find the things that you want, you can suggest a data set. And my old team there really works very, very hard to open up that data. Not always successful for a variety of reasons, but there is a real willingness to collaborate across sectors. And that scale, that ease of access, you contrast the profs looking at their CD-ROMs with that easily accessible website where you can poke around and you can see the Google Analytics, you can see how many different times the data sets have been downloaded, all that sort of thing. For me, that's just impossible without digital. Similarly, another benefit is ease of use. So things like findability and usability, we can actually see how people are interacting with the open government assets. Are they using them? Are they helpful? You can comment on the data sets. Let's say the data dictionary isn't great, or you had to do a bunch of cleanup when you tried to use the data. You can actually comment that, and then the team can improve it. We can actually make things accessible for people with a variety of accessibility needs. And frankly, we have legal obligations to do so. You can have more of a service orientation, right? And so certainly within my previous role in the government of British Columbia, we put a lot of time and effort into creating an API gateway so that you could use these open assets, not for static data dumps, but hey, let's use this data to build a service, and you take Environment Canada weather data. How many times is that API taken advantage of on a daily basis? That really does allow you to use these different assets for service outcomes and to make the lives of Canadians better. And then finally, having all these things in the open, having digital mechanisms for accessing them mean that you can have the feedback mechanisms. You can suggest the data set, you can observe what are the patterns online. You can have all that sort of that virtuous flywheel that allows for continuous improvement. So for me, those are the big ones in terms of the interplay between like how digital helps with open, its scale, its ease, tackling those barriers of use, the service orientation, and then impact and feedback signals.
Yuri, I'm not sure if you want to comment on that, but I do have a question that I'd like you to take. So I'll let you comment in that if you want to. But the question I want to ask you is, what are the implications? I think this is appropriate too, because we see your signal is a bit glitchy from time to time here. So what are the implications of public sector digital services and the digital divide with many citizens without the ability to access these services? And just to clarify, I know that your internet service is a bit periodic at times. So you're one of those citizens maybe without the access.
Yeah, my satellites are unhappy. But I just wanted to comment a couple of things. First of all, Jaimie and Barb, what you both said were really good, but I wanted to pick up, Jaimie, on one thing that you noted was a good thing, findability. And I'm going to suggest to you that we're nowhere near being in a good place from a findability point of view. The fact that there are data sets that are identical in content, but half a dozen organizations call them by different names. They don't use tags. There's all kinds of reasons why it's almost impossible to find all the data that the users are interested in one place. So we're talking about federated data. We've started, but we're not there. There's a long way to go for that. But I guess the other comment I wanted to make around digital transformation for impacting on OpenGov and open data is, first of all, there's a need to revamp policies, and you kind of have to go through a pilot stage where you're learning through experience before you get to that point where you do a reset on some of these corporate policies. An example, like open by default, for open data can be a showstopper for a lot of people, and transparency, which is a core open government principle, and can be facilitated by digital transformation, is not necessarily adopted with open arms by politicians. Transparency? No, I don't want people to see what I'm doing. Also impacts on accountability. No transparency. How can how do you keep them accountable if the information isn't readily accessible? And I'm not going to point to anything specific like letters of mandate, but just saying.
Yeah, did you want to ask about the digital divide, though, having as a user experiencing that? Because perhaps, I don't know whether Barbara and Jaimie are prepared to talk about that, but I'd be interested in your positions on that. What can be done to make sure people do have the access?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, I'm in rural Ontario, currently on satellite, but Rogers Cable is sitting just outside my door. So hopefully, within the next month or so, I'll be in fiber. But I mean, I'm privileged from the point of view that I can afford to get internet service, right? And I have the technology, but I'm very concerned about we're not able to cover off the urban scenario where people are living in poverty, can't access technology don't have the money for getting these services. So, and I'm not sure what the solution is, but opening up some public Wi-Fi would be a good start, and letting some of these people know of the services that are available through their public library system as well.
I think that's a great comment, Yuri, and absolutely, we need to have better access in this country. I would argue that there are a few other things that we need to think about with the digital divide. In addition to access, there are things like participation, things like the ecosystems, and the ability for there to be citizen accountability and oversight. We did a study around digital equity, and we found, frankly, pretty horrifying stats in Canada around the ability of people across different sort of socioeconomic backgrounds to interact with digital services. Older Canadians, poorer Canadians, Indigenous Canadians, and other racialized groups have a way more difficult time. And the sort of obvious solution that I think many people cite is skills development. Okay, fabulous. It ends up that older Canadians have a lot of trouble even going and having that skills development. They don't know where to start, or it's overwhelming, or the cost is prohibitive. And so there are just, yes, access is a major thing, absolutely. But once there is access, we can't just declare victory. There are so many other parts associated with the digital divide. And so I think that there are a couple of things that we really need to be better at doing. We need to design for everybody based on lived experiences. I think for far too long, government has been sort of focused on delivering a program and saying, okay, I'm going to deliver the program, you figure out how to interact with it. And we've got really a strong track record of going out and having a really deep ethnographic research around the lived experiences, the needs of people, the barriers, then building prototypes, getting people to test it out and seeing how they actually interact. And if a person can't figure out how to interact with an online government service, that's the services problem, not the humans problem. And so we need to be much more conscientious around designing around the capabilities of people across Canada. You talk about accessibility. The last time I looked at the stats, 12% of Canadians have accessibility needs. If you aren't designing for those people, you are systematically excluding an entire swath of our population. Not only is it inefficient, it's wrong. It's wrong. And I think that as digital leaders, we need to have strong values, and we need to embed those values in the way that we design and deliver our services. So I'm sorry to get on my little, get a little ranty there. But frankly, this is one of the most interesting and challenging, probably one of the most important things that we're going to grapple with as Canadians who are interested in data and digital. We need to think very carefully about who we're designing for and what kind of equity parameters are we advancing in the way that we design and deliver. For me, my country, my values are that we design for everybody. And I would love to see more digital leaders systematically taking that human-centered design approach and building around the lived experiences of people across Canada.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I think we're all in agreement on that one. Barbara, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say it's very interesting working at the municipal sector because you're so close to the population that you are serving. You don't have the luxury of being 1 or 2, 3 steps removed. And I love the conversation about values because it all comes down to that. We haven't tackled it yet here, but I would point you to Montreal, our sort of sister smart city project that has created a digital charter, a data and digital charter, so that essentially a promise and a set of values to the public about how they will use and deploy a smart technology and service delivery and so on. And I think that more and more you're going to see that have to happen or should happen for governments, particularly those who are deploying sensors and parking spaces and then trails and so on, of what the citizen can expect and what the values are and issues of safety and privacy and so on. But I also want to go back and talk about the digital divide because it's so multidimensional, and the rural digital divide is very real. And then you layer on an elderly person in a rural area, a poor elderly person, a person with different lived experience. And then you've got multiple systemic issues that you're trying to address when you're delivering services. So those are very real. I spent 10 years at the Ontario government working on rural broadband, and still to this day, just like Yuri, I'm in my office today because we don't have great broadband access at our house yet. I do see progress, and I do see it was an argument 15, 20 years ago about, oh, we don't want to get ahead of the market's going to take care of this issue. Well, it's not. And there is a role around, and that's why we talk about open government and open data, because we need to hold those things that are increasingly becoming valuable in common, and as a value, a shared access for the public. We've been thinking of, we haven't made as much progress as I had hoped, but we have this concept of a data utility, which is a version of a data trust, just like municipalities deliver water and electricity and so on. There is something to be said about how we hold data and share it in common, and including with the private sector. I saw there were some comments in the chat. And what we've done is create a small version of that, an online data shared kind of a federated portal between the local governments and community agencies. And so it's a great start. And then in terms of accessibility, not everybody wants to look at data sets. So what we've done is shared the data sets, but created stories around them, and helping people to understand and think about what is the impact, stories that are of relevance to people in their everyday lives. So that's kind of a mixed bag answer to the last couple of questions, but I wanted to share that.
Well, we actually do have a couple of questions coming in, and the one you referred to is from Zarin, and I'm going to come back to that specifically, but apropos to a couple of comments we've already had from Jaimie in particular, the idea of, this is from Jonathan, and full disclosure, Jonathan's our Director of Education at Go Open Data. He's also working on our ongoing hackathon. For information about that, you can go to our website, go-opendata.ca. Had to get that in for you, Jonathan. But his comment here was that universal design, what's necessary to some is good for all. And a specific question, and I think we need to go back to you, Barb, is the reflection on digital transformation and acceleration caused by COVID. How could the chief digital and data officer use their statutory authority in the Simpler, Faster, Better Services Act to consolidate that acceleration across ministries led by the IT clusters, serving the Ontario public administration on the front lines and elected representatives? And I'm coming to you simply because you're in Ontario and you're a little closer perhaps than Jaimie is to the Ontario Simpler, Better.
Yeah, I was going to defer that one to Jaimie. I'm so much more at the municipal level now, and a little bit more out of touch with the Ontario situation. So I don't know, Jaimie, do you have any insight on that one?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would actually argue that Ontario has been doing a pretty good job. The Ontario Digital Service Standard is a really powerful mechanism for establishing clear expectations for the different elements of effective digital product design and delivery. And so there's, if anybody's curious, you can find all this content online. There are very clear requirements that the province has put forward saying, hey, at the discovery phase, this is what good problem definition looks like. This is what we mean by saying, when we say go and get to know your users. At the alpha stage, these are the expectations. There's clear guidance around, okay, this is where you start prototyping. This is where you're creating your wireframes, and you're doing that continuous feedback cycle that I was talking about earlier. So I would argue that a lot of that is extremely positive. To Yuri's initial point, there's a lot of change management that comes with that. And so I've had experiences where we go and we do this work, and the organization is like, all right, well, great. Now I know my users. Can I just go and create, use this tool that I had in mind already? So there is change management, and sometimes senior executives are sitting there and they're like, hey, I want that solution right now. I'm like, okay, we'll do it, but we do need to go and spend some time understanding the problem. It's like that Einstein quote, I'd spend 99% of the time trying to understand the problem and 1%, like I'm not advocating for anything nearly that extreme, but really taking the time to understand the user base, their needs, and designing around those needs. We used to spend tons of time writing out requirements for technology systems. The way of designing based on evidence has shifted. And those of us who build products every day, build services, I think sometimes it's, we see the value of that every day. And sometimes folks are not necessarily as familiar with the emerging best practices. Around the specific question, how can we use that specific act, I think is an interesting one. And there are great provisions in that act. In general, I've seen lots of governments experiment with using mandatory policy tools of different sorts. And they have very mixed results. And there are lots of interesting examples of this. The one that I'm most familiar with was the Government of Canada's Directive on Open Government. It's easy to write down something like, hey, maximize the release of data. And then you've got organizations that, instead of updating a data set or creating an API, release a new data set once a week. And you're like, wow, you've got 50 data sets that came out in the past year? Well, no, like you've got one data set and it just takes you a bunch of time to make this stuff useful. Similarly, one of the more interesting policy moves that I've seen recently is the December 2021 presidential decree that came out of the US. So there was an executive order requiring federal agencies to prioritize customer experience. In theory, full support, really powerful. In practice, you need to be supporting individual public servants in understanding what that means, in measuring it, in investing around, so many people don't necessarily have the background in the kind of research that I'm describing. And so there is a lot of capability building, a lot of coaching. And I think that there are really neat opportunities for the public sector to collaborate a little bit more effectively, learning together, building together. In the BC government, we had invested quite heavily in common components, which were open source components that are available for anybody to use. Serving together, like let's talk in Canada about tell us once and having no wrong door. Let's talk about omni-channel experience. Let's talk about designing around life events. When somebody shows up and they say, okay, I've been working for whatever and I'm due for retirement, like it's not rocket science what's going to happen next. They're probably going to want to apply for CPP and OAS. Can we not anticipate that and say, hey, guess what? We just registered you and you're going to get your next payment unless you opt out. Can't we design around, somebody gets pregnant and is, near the end of their term, and like it's not total rocket science that they might at some point want their child to have childcare. Can we proactively register that child for childcare? And so I think designing around life events is probably going to be one of the more interesting opportunities for the public sector in the near future. And I would love for governments to more closely collaborate around what that might look like.
That's a great segue into collaboration. And it relates to some degree to Zaren's question as well. His comment was digital transformation. There are data collection and sharing that come from the private sector through partnerships. And how will that fit into the open data process or goals of government? And we could add to that just the opportunities for collaboration among governments and even the private sector with this digital transformation. Who would like to weigh in on that one first?
I would. So we've been working at the City of Guelph for a while and with other cities on something called the Municipal Innovation Exchange and the Civic Accelerator. And what that is an opportunity for us to, it's a very open government opportunity in many ways. It's an opportunity where we put a challenge out. So challenge-based procurement, not the whole business requirements kind of deal. And look for the private sector to come inside government to work alongside our staff who have identified a problem that they really can't, it's on the side of their desk and they can't solve it alone. And so it ends up in really interesting opportunities for opening up the doors of government, bringing the private sector in, working on a shared problem. Often it's about process and problem solving, but often involves digital transformation, innovation around technology. And I'll give you an example. We did this in our project around, we're trying to separate or make sure that organics in our waste collection stream are separated out so that they can go back into compost and other things and not create, food waste, methane gas, all kinds of problems. So we put that challenge out. How can we try to solve this? And we brought a company in who's put artificial intelligence on as a test on one of our waste trucks, and it shows pictures of the food waste, and we can categorize it, and it's a real market opportunity. If it's a prototype right now, but it's a market opportunity that can be shared across municipalities. And so the opportunity for collaboration is huge, but also the business gets the opportunity to learn about their marketplace, which can be any level of government, but municipal governments in this situation. So it's a two-way street, and I think that's always important. And then the data and the prototyping can be shared as well. So.
Yuri, I wonder if you wanted to mention the Good to Know that's starting, which is an example, I think, of just collaboration with us through Open North. So this might be your chance to plug that.
Yeah, I mean, collaborating with civil society is something that comes naturally to us. And we're involved both with local organizations, national organizations, and internationally with organizations like the Open Government Partnership and the Open Data Charter. But I want to speak to the collaboration thing, which I've been promoting for as long as I can remember. And the problem is, in some cases, it's an issue of control of the projects. A lot of people like to control the projects. It's more difficult to coordinate and collaborate with others. In some cases, it's a timing thing. So I need my project now. You need yours. You got it in your 2 to 3 year time frame. So that becomes a problem. But the thing that drives me crazy is that there is so much duplication of effort. And my personal experience within the municipal government was, why are you doing the same thing that this guy next door has already done? Like, why don't we leverage what they have and try and enhance? But we don't even know who's doing what. Okay, all levels of government. How many projects do you think there are? 100,000 projects? How many of them are so similar that they should be a single project that they all throw their resources at? Okay, I'm going to get off this rant and open it up for somebody else, and talk about the ability to creating solutions through prototyping and doing agile iterations and working together. So I'll throw one challenge that we collectively have. How about ethical AI?
Mm-hmm.
That's local to global. If we wanted to collaborate on something, I would like to see that be the topic. Okay, I'm done.
I love the rant, Yuri. I think that was fabulous. And my 2 cents would be that any person who's in the public service who is thinking about building digital opportunities, digital services products, should probably think a little bit about licensing. Is it good and appropriate to think about an open source license? That's something that we were doing systematically in the government of British Columbia, and it created significant business value for us. Just Google government BC GitHub, and you'll see well over 1,000 repos in there. You'll see an active community that's collaborating. Not everything can or should be open. To be clear, like, I'm a great lover of open data and open source and all that. Not everything is a meaningful candidate for public release. There's lots of, the mosaic effect, data aggregation. These are things we need to be thoughtful about. But there are many more things that can and should be open. And for me, like, as people who care about services for folks across Canada, like, let's make things open. It usually makes things better.
We're actually quite close to the 1 o'clock. We said we could go over if we have any questions. Oh, and sure enough, here comes one. But Barb, I don't know if you had any response to Yuri's challenge. No? Okay. This question, and it's directed to you actually. The Municipal Innovation Exchange is a great resource. I wonder how many youth would use these resources. It would be interesting to run this by Civic Tech Toronto. Any comments regarding the publicity of these?
Yeah, did somebody put it in the chat?
Yes, it's in the chat with a link.
Good. Okay. Yeah, that would be interesting to run it by youth. And it really, so I think that's the other part of digital transformation and the role of government is also thinking about the innovation ecosystem in the community and thinking about it from an economic transformation, economic development perspective, and thinking about it from supporting the civic sector to raise their capacity and ability. So I think that's a fabulous idea and a really interesting opportunity.
And he's just put in another link there in the chat. And we do publish the chat with our YouTube publication. So we are recording the session. Of course, it comes up on YouTube. So people that haven't followed here, if they do revisit, they can see it. So I'm wondering if we should wrap it up. I don't see any more questions coming. And I know some of you have us close to a hard stop. Let's just see. Yeah, okay, there's just some dialogue going on in the chat. All right, well, I think, a very speedy coffee chat today here in the cafe, and really appreciate your input. And I think it's an ongoing discussion, certainly, and it'll be interesting to re-examine where we are post-elections, for example. The civic elections are coming up in Ontario as well. So my thanks go to Barbara and Jaimie, and of course, Yuri, for participating today. It behooves us to take advantage of having some people in the audience as we wrap up to just promote us a little bit so people can have further discussion with us. We're always looking for members and input. So go-opendata.ca is our website, but also we're on LinkedIn. We have a company page, and we'd love you to join us there for discussions. We're ramping up article writing and trying to get into some more discussions with you, basically, if you're LinkedIn members. I mentioned YouTube. We call it GoodTube, but we're on YouTube, and we've actually got an address now that you can get to YouTube directly. Just go to goodtube.ca. And finally, if you want to reach out to us directly, it's connect@go-opendata.ca. So that being said, I'm just going to run a quick end credits and we'll end the meeting officially. We do have the Good to Know starting in next week, I think, is the first episode, and we'll be sending out some information on that as well. But look to the webverse for some information on that through Twitter, etc. So that being said, thanks again. We'll hit the credits, and we'll see you next time. Be good to each other.